We're on Chof Tes Amud Beis by the Mishnah. Shavuos Bitui. So now we're having a little bit of a recap. This Mishnah is we switched from Shavuos Bitui to Shavuos Shav, from a Shavuos where someone says something to a Shavuos where someone says something that's nonsensical. But now, before we start Shavuos Ha'edus, the Mishnah is going to contrast the dinner of Shavuos Bitui and Shavuos Shav as opposed to Shavuos Ha'edus. So that's why the Mishnah is going to say a bunch of things that don't seem to be very relevant. Shavuos Bitui neheges ba'anoshim u'benoshim. It can be said by both men and women, b'kroivim u'rechaikim, by those who are your karev. Even if there's someone who's a karev, they could say, you can make it about them, u'b'rechaikim, or someone who's not a karev. B'kshein or b'ksulin, whether the person is kashalated or pasalated. B'fnei bezdin v'shaloi b'fnei bezdin. And it could be in front of bezdin and not in front of bezdin. Mipi atzmei, as long as it's being said by himself. Now, clearly, if you look at all these things, these are, just to give a little, we're about to start Shavuos Ha'edus, so I'll give you a little heads up about Shavuos Ha'edus. Shavuos Ha'edus is not as it would, if you don't think about it, it just goes into your head, you think of Shavuos Ha'edus is the Shavuos that an aid make when he says Edus. It's not what Shavuos Ha'edus is. Shavuos Ha'edus is the Shavuos that if someone says, please come say Edus for me in my Dinyan Mamonis, and the person says, I don't know any Edus, and or he says, I'm making a shvur that I don't know the Edus, and he really does, that's a Shavuos Edus that he's going to have to bring a carbon oil of Yared. So the din of a Shavuos Edus only applies where a person is capable of saying Edus in the first place. If he doesn't actually know Edus, or if he's someone who's not a kosher aid, for example, like a woman or a karev, or someone who's like a ganef, who's not kosher to say this. All those people, they're not going to be clear a carbon oil of Yared if they make a Shavuos Ha'edus, because their Edus wouldn't have been valuable anyway, it would be useless anyway. So that's why I was saying that those rules that will apply by a Shavuos Ha'edus are not relevant in the context of a Shavuos Bitui. But we say, mipi atzmai. It could be, b'fnei bezin v'shaloi b'fnei bezin mipi atzmai. If he makes the shvua himself, meaning he says, I make a shvua that I'm going to eat a loaf of bread, then it doesn't make a difference if he's in Bezdin or not, that's a shvuas bitui. We're going to see, obviously, there's going to be difference between whether it's b'fnei Bezdin or not, l'gabe shvuas ha'edus. Now, just to clarify, because the Mishnah is it's going to seem unclear when we learn this Amud, but when we get to the next parak, it'll be a little clearer. A Shavuos Atzmai can take two forms. Shavuos Atzmai could be where a person says, Shua Shani Eichel or Shani Lo Eichel. That's obvious Shavuos Atzmai. Another Shavuos Atzmai is if another person says to him, you make a Shavua that you're not going to eat a loaf of bread. And he says, Amen. That's essentially it's a Shemea Ka'ina, and by saying Amen, it's as if he himself said what the other person said. But a Shavua that's not mipi atzmai, a shvua that's coming from someone else, a piacherim, is if the other person said, make a shvua that you're not going to eat bread, and he says, I'm not going to eat bread. So he didn't say a shvua, he just said, I'm not going to eat bread, and he didn't say amen. So then he's just repeating the other person's shvua. The other person said a shvua on his behalf, and he said, like when you can think of it in your head as when someone, a Baal Din, says, I want to be mashbiya you to say Edus for me, and the guy says, I want you to say Edus for me. The guy says, I don't know Edus. He said, mashbiya chani, I'm being mashbiya you that you don't know the Edus. So if he says Amen, then he's treated as if he repeated Edus. But if he just says, I don't know Edus, then it's not treated as if he made a shvua. He just took the other person's shvua and he agreed to it, and that's not enough. It has to be amen. That should be mipi atzmai. But all this is not really relevant because we're saying in this, it doesn't make it bezin shaloi. So that is not a shvua legabe a shvuas bitui. When he says he agrees to the shvua, it's meaningless. We're going to see there's going to be a machlokes that when he agrees to the shvua that someone else made on him without saying amen, if it's b'fnei bez, then that would be a Shavuos Ha'edus. But in a Shavuos Bita, it's not relevant. It's totally not a Shavuot at all. Okay. Just to continue, and the din of a Shavuos Bita, like we've said many times, that if he does it on purpose, he gets malchus. If he does it b'shay, he brings a carbon oil of yard. Shavuos shav, the heges b'anoshim b'chaykim b'rkoyim b'kshem b'sum b'nei bezim shleipim b'nei bezim piatzmai, all the same dinim as we said by a Shavuos Bita. B'chayavin al zoyin makas v'al shig gasay potter. But a Shavuos shav, unlike a Shavuos Bita that was described in the pasuk in that parsha of carbon oil of yared, and you bring carbon oil of yared. A Shavuos shav is not described there, and there's no carbon designated for it, and therefore he's going to be potter from bringing a carbon at all if he does a b'shayim. Achazu hamushbam piacherim chayiv. Both of these, if someone it has to make a shvua because of someone else, he's chayiv. Now I just gave you this whole explanation that you're mushbal piacherim, you're not chayiv. So what does the Mishnah say? So you have to they add in the Bach says ketzad lo yachalti hayoyim v'alachim lo hinachti tefillin hayoyim. Person says I didn't eat today, or I didn't put on tefillin today. Mashbiach ani, and the other person says I'm imposing a shvua on you about what you said. But Amar Amen, and he says Amen to the person who said Mashbiach ani chayiv. That's what we said, that mushba al piacherim is chayiv. Only in that specific case is he considered not to be a mushba al piacherim. He's really a mushba al piatz. The Gemara gets into this. Amar Shmuel, kala aina amen. Even though it seems clear from our Mishnah, then the Gemara is going to ask, where do you know this from? And eventually we'll get back to our Mishnah. Amar Shmuel, kala aina amen achar shvua k'moitzi shvuim b'pivdam. Whoever says amen after a shvua that someone else imposed on him, it's as if he said it himself. That's what he was saying. That's like a mushba bibiatzma. The chsivra amar isha amen amen. It says by they make a shvua on the isha who's a saita. When she drinks the mei saita, she has to make a shvua that she was not mizana, and she says they say what the shvua is, and she says amen amen. So we say that's treated. So you see the Torah treats amen as if she made the shvua herself. Amar papa mishmei derava masnisu braysa nami deka. I could also prove it from a stira between a Mishnah and a Brisa, which we still haven't gone back to our own Mishnah. Diktani. Shavuos ha'edis neheges, this is a Brisa. Shavuos ha'edis neheges ba'anoshim v'loi b'noshim. B'rechoikim v'loi b'kroivim, b'ksherim v'loi b'psulim. Like we said, our Mishnah said that the Shavuos Bita and the Shavuos Shav on Noyig, whether it's a Noshim or a Noshim, Kroivim or Ksherim, but a Shavuos ha'edis is not going to work with. If you ask someone to say Edis and she's a woman, she can't say Edis anyway. So there's not going to be a Shavuos Edis. If you say make a Shavuah that you don't know Edis, she can't say the Edis anyway. And the same thing with someone who's a Karev, and the same thing with someone who's not kosher. The Gemara is going to explain later on what that's talking about. It's talking about someone who's not a Melech, who can't say Edis. And just like we said in our Mishnah, it's going to be whether he's in front of Bezdin or not Bezdin if he says it out of his own volition. Rameir says, however, if the Baal Din says Mashbiach ani, that you don't know Edis, and he's maskim, then he's only going to be mechoyev if that happens at Bezdin. In Bezdin, that will be sufficient. We're not going to say it's not a shvua. It's not a good shvua. The Chacham are going to be chaylik. They're going to say even outside of Bezdin, it has to be bifi mipi atzma. The Tanya b'Braisa, we learned in a Braisa. So that was the first. That was the first Brisa. Now we're going to say, I don't know what we call the two Brisas. The tiny Brisa, Shavuos Eitzes Ketzad, is really a Mishnah. The Tanya.
That's what we said. Must nisun a Brisa nami deka.
Right, but the first thing was not a Mishnah. Was it a Mishnah? Oh no, right. The Tanya was a Mishnah. The first one was the Mishnah on the next block. Right. So that's the Mishnah that we're about to see. So now we're asking from a Brisa. That the Brisa says not like that. The Tanya Brisa, Shavuos Eitzes Ketzad. If He said to the Eidim, come and say Eidus. I want you to say Eidus. Maybe they say, no, we don't want to, I don't have Eidus. And he says, I want you to make a Shvuah. Oisha Amru Ein, She'en on Yodim Eidus. He said, you go, the Baldin said, I want you to make a Shvuah that you don't know Eidus. Oisha Amru Ein on Yodim Eidus. Or if they volunteered, they said, I don't know Eidus. Mashbi Ani Aleichem. And he said, I'm demanding a Shvuah. But Amru Amin. And they said, Amin. Bein Bifnei Bezin, Bein Shaloi Bifnei Bezin. Ben piazza, ben piacherim. Kivisharabah for Wahan Chayiv. Divrei Meir. Remeir here is saying there's no difference of whether it's b'fnei bezdin or not b'fnei bezdin. The person is going to be chayiv, even though it's a mujra mipiacherim. The other person told him to say it. So kashin adadi. The Mishnah had said that. We said we said if it comes from someone else, you only mechayev it's in bezdin. And now he's saying if someone else was mashbiya you and you said amen, it doesn't make a difference whether it's b'fnei bezdin or not. It's acceptable. Obviously the Brisa said it's talking about where he said amen. So there, taka doesn't make a difference. It's not a mushba b'yacherim. That's actually a mushba b'yatzmai. And the Mishnah is talking about where he didn't say amen, where the Baldin said, say, and I want you to say Eidus. And he said, okay, and mashbi ani aleichem, and he said, I agree. Or he said, I didn't say the Eidus. But he didn't say amen. So he didn't, it's not as if he repeated, it's not a Shavuos atzmai, and therefore it's not going to be valid. It's not going to be a Shavuos. Shema Aminu. Gemara says, so you see from here a chiluk between where he said amen and other types of mushba b'piachem. I could also prove it from the Mishnah that we just learned. The Katani Shavuos bita neheges ba'anoshim anoshim b'chaykim b'rkoyim b'kshem b'sulin b'fnei bezim shleim b'bezim b'yatzoi yin b'piacherim loy. We say b'fnei bezim b'piatzmai. But it's only mipiatzmai. Mipiatzmai in mipiacherim loy. So our Mishnah is mashma that you're not going to be chayiv if you do it shalom mipiacherim. Tani sefer that yet the end of the Mishnah says v'zeh mushma mipiacherim chayiv. But at the end of the Mishnah we say achazu mushma mipiacherim chayiv. Then we say the ketzad of where it's talking about Omer Amen. Kasha no adad. The Allah shramina hada Amen on Amen. The sefer of the Mishnah is talking about where he said Amen, which the Mishnah explained hada lo Amen. The Gemara says, so what is Shmuel adding? Our Mishnah seems, it's a little hard to even understand what we're saying that the Mishnah is Kashan Adadi, because the Mishnah itself explains it's talking about Ana Amen. So he says, so what is Shmuel adding by telling you this din that Ana Amen is Mipi Atzmai? We have both from the Mishnah later on and the Brisa, and we have from our own Mishnah. It's clear that Ana Amen is different than just Mushma Mipi Acherim. So one might have said that when we say Ana Amen, it's just describing a case, because that's the way typically a person would respond to Mushma B'Acherim. That's the classic way to answer. But it's not saying that has any more force than anything else. And you're going to have to come up with another teretz. He's just telling you this is just so you should understand what the Mishnah was saying. Okay. Hajan Allah Shavuos Shtayim, Hajan Chalon. Okay, so we already had a little hakdama for Shavuos Eidus before, but we'll just repeat it again one more time for clarity, because hopefully over Shavuos you'll go to a shir and hear the next, get into Shavuos Eidus a little bit. So Shavuos Eidus is a shvuah that when Reuven and Shimon are in a din Torah, and Reuven goes to Levi and says, "I want you to say Eidus." And Levi says, I don't know Eidus. And Reuven says, I don't believe you. You were standing right there. I'm mashbiya you to say a shvuah. And Levi makes the shvuah. That's included. That's the first thing that was mentioned in that original parsha of Karban Oila V'Yared. Right? We said that someone who said, Nefesh Kisechta, person who does a chait, V'shama Koil Allah, and he hears someone requiring a shvuah from him. who ate yad, and he wasn't ate, and he saw or he knows. If he doesn't say the edus, he's going to bear a sin, and then we go into tuma, and we go all the different things, shuas bitui, and and any one of the things that we've discussed so far, he's going to have to bring a carbon oil of yared. Okay, so this is another din of carbon oil of yared, and like we said before, the other thing to always keep in mind is that the shuas edus only applies to someone who could actually be an aid. If he's not a valid aid, even if he's lying, even if he saw it, even if let's say it was a woman who saw the edus, and he says, "I want you to say edus," and she says, "I don't know the edus," and make a shvua, and she says, "Okay, I'll make a shvua. I don't know the edus." It's not going to be chayiv for shuas edus. Maybe it will be a shvua shav because it's a useless shvua, but it's not a shvua edus because she couldn't have said the edus in the first place. Kizak the mission. Shuas edus neheges b'anoshim v'loy b'noshim. A shuas edus is only by men, not by women. Again, because they can't be edim. B'chaykim v'loy b'kroivim. If it's a karav of the baldin, he can't say edus. B'ksherim v'loy b'sulin, not with someone who's puzzled to say edus. It's only talking about someone who's a ruyan lahed. The Gemara is going to explain later on. That means not to exclude a king. If he's saying it it doesn't make a difference if it's b'fnei bezin or not. But if, like the Gemara, the previous Amud explained, if he says it meaning that the other person asked him to say it and he didn't say amen, but he just said, I didn't see the edus. That will only be a shuas edus if the person said, "I want you to be mashbi'a you," and in bezin he says, "I don't know the edus." That will be considered as if he made a shvua, because we're going to see from the Gemara later on that that's the mashmayis of the pasuk. The pasuk is talking about where the person said, "V'shama koil Allah," that he asked him to make a shvua, and it's telling you that in that case, if he's b'fnei bezin, it's going to be, and it's talking about b'fnei bezin, and that's what Torah is coming to tell you, that he's still going to be chayiv shvuas edus, even though it's not b'piyatzmei. Because that's what the Torah described, the shama koil Allah, that the person asked him to make a shvua. He says, even if it's b'fi atzmai, you're only going to be chayiv b'fnei bezin. Because, like we said, we're going to prove later on that the pasuk is talking about specifically in front of Bezdin. So, therefore, even though his shvua is a valid shvua, and he says amen, it's if he said it, but it doesn't make a difference. Even if he said, "I'm making a shvua," if he's outside of Bezdin, that's not a shvua se'edus. So, shvua se'edus, according to Chum, always has to be b'fnei Bezdin. Another very unusual thing about the shvua se'edus, v'chayav in al-zadan hashkua, yechayiv, for only if this is b'mezid. Unlike every other chatas, the carbon oil yared is a chatas that goes up and down. You can give more or less depending how wealthy you are. But this is a unique chatas that you bring for a mezid, if you did it on purpose. But although it's generally only b'mezid, if he's shaygig, as Rashi explains, if he's a shaygig that he doesn't know what the einish is for it, but he knows that he's lying when he's saying that he doesn't know the edus, he's still going to bring the carbon oil of yared. So it means although the zadin has to be, the mazid has to be, not that he's a mazid bedin. He has to be a mazid as far as that he knows that he's lying about the shvua, because it doesn't say v'nelam at all on this. This shvua doesn't say v'nelam like it says by the shvua's bitui. So this is a mazid. Ve'enin chayavin al shigasa. But he's not chayiv if he's a shaygik, if he's a plain shaygik, if he doesn't even realize that he's lying. And the carbon he brings is the carbon oil v'yared. So Gemara first goes off on a side. The next blot is totally a side issue, nothing really to do with shvuas edus. Where does this come from that a woman can't say edus? The Tana Rabbanan. It says, it says two men will stand up. And the pasuk is talking about Edom, right? The pasuk says, here's the pasuk. The two people who asher lahem ariv, that have a dispute, they go in front of Lifnei HaKayanim HaShoiftim HaShiyu B'Yomim, they go to the Bezdin. Edom, and that Amdu Shnei Anashim is talking about the Edom. The pashas of the pasuk is Amdu Shnei Anashim Asher Le'amariv. It means the two disputants. So now we're saying Amdu Shnei Anashim means the two Edom, and we call them Anashim. So that's why we're saying that it's that we know that Edom can only be men. But the Gemara says the pashas is it's talking about Bali Dinim. Why are you saying that Shnei Anashim is referring to the Edom? So the Gemara says Asher Le'amariv. What does it say? Shnei Anashim. It says Asher Le'amariv. Hamani Mikayim v'Amdu Shnei Anashim be'Edom HaKasim Medaber. That's a raya that it must be talking about Edom, and we said Anashim. That tells you Edom can only be men. Bim nafshach loimer nemakan sheni v'nemel alon shnei. If you're not satisfied with that explanation, I can tell you another explanation. It says over here v'Amdu Shnei Anashim, and it also says lo yokum echad beishal chalav v'nulachatz b'chochet asher yechta al pi shnei Edom al pi shlosh Edom. It says al pi shnei Edom. So mal alon be'Edom avkam be'Edom. Just like it says Amdu Shnei Edom, and over here it says Shnei Anashim. So we say that the Shnei Anashim over here is also talking about the Edom. In fact, the Gemara Mayim Nafshach Lema. Why do I need an additional raya? Once we said the first raya that we said it says Asher Lahem Ariv is referring to the Bali Dinim, so the Shnei Anashim has to be referring to the Edom. But If the Asher Lahem Ariv is talking about different people that the Shnei Anashim, it is said V'amdu Shnei Anashim V'Asher Lahem Ariv. Why does it makes it sound like it's all the same person? That's why we say the second raya. Tanya, another brisa that says a different version of the same cheshbon. Maybe it's talking about the if Yishnayim boin ladin, shloisha ain't boin ladin. Why would it say Amdu Shnei Anashim? You can have you can almost never see a din Torah when you get the summons that there's not 4 people on one side and 6 people on the other. There's always a bunch of parties in the Baldin. So why are we saying Shnei Anashim? So therefore, it must be talking about. It says Shnei Anashim must be talking about the Edom. We also have the second raya. What's the flaw with the first raya? Maybe all the pasuk means when it says Shtei Nashim, it doesn't mean literally 2 people. It means the 2 parties. Each side, there's a plaintiff and a defendant, and the plaintiff could include a bunch of parties, but that's the Shtei Nashim, the plaintiff and the defendant. So Nemar Kan Sheni, Nemar Sheni, Malam Be'edim, Avkan Be'edim. So we have the second right. Tanida. V'amdu Shnei Anashim Be'edim HaKasim B'dabat. I'm Be'edim Ein Bali Din. Am V'chi Anashim Boin L'Din. Nashim Ein Boyis L'Din. And what it says, why would it say Shtei Anashim if it's referring to the Bali Dinim? Certainly Nashim have to be able to go to a Din Torah. So why would it say Shtei Anashim? What do we have to have a second teretz? If you'll answer that the reason why it says Shnei Anashim is not because women are disqualified from being Bali Din, but just because it's not typical for women, because of Kol Kvuda, they'll find a representative to show up in court and argue on her behalf. So Nema Kan Sheni V'Nalon Sheni Malam Be'edim Avkan Be'edim. Tan Rabban V'Amdu Shnei Anashim Mitzvah L'Bali Dinin Sheyamdu. Tanakama holds that it says Amdu Shnei Anashim. Another thing you see from this pasuk, we said that first din that it's referring, but the Amdu part tells you that the Bali Din have to stand in court. Rav Yehuda disagrees. Shamati Shemratzu L'Hayshav V'Shneim V'Shivin. Rav Yehuda says it's up to the Bezdin. Bezdin can decide whatever their rules of the court are. They can have them stand. They can have them sit. Ezu also, the only thing that's also the only thing they can't do is have one stand and one sit, because then you're showing imbalance, and the other person who's standing will feel uncomfortable, and he won't say his tinus. Or if you give one person more time and one person less, you can't show favoritism because you will stop one of the person from advocating on his behalf. Tanarabah. That's where this din comes from, that you can't have different, you can't treat them differently. Because if it's tzedek tishbad amisecha, you have to be fair to everyone. Another thing you can learn from this pasuk of tzedek tishbad amisecha. It's telling you what we all grew up with, right? But tzedek tishbad amisecha, you should judge a person favorably. Should be done in l'kaf schos. You should be try to find a reason why he's doing what he's doing. That's an innocent reason. Tani Rabbi Yosef, but tzedek tishbad amisecha. He darshans amisecha, am she'itcha. He divides the word amisecha to two words. Am itcha. Am she'itcha b'tayru b'mitzvahs. If someone tzedek tishbad, someone who is with you in Torah mitzvahs, meaning that Bezdin, if they have in front of them someone who is their equal in Torah mitzvahs, meaning a Talmud Chacham, you should try to be danim yafa or yafa. You should try to give him a good din. The Gemara, and this is obviously sounds very strange. What does that mean? You give a better shake to a Talmud Chacham. The Gemara is going to clarify that's not what it means. Ravula Breder of Eloy Havale Dina Kameder of Nachman. He had a Ravula was a Talmud Chacham, had a din Torah in front of Rav Nachman. Shalach le Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef sent to Rav Nachman the Dayan. Ula Chavarenu Amis b'Torah b'mitzvahs. Ula is our Chavar and he's the same as us in Torah mitzvahs. So he was giving Rav Nachman a heads up that he's having a Talmud Chacham to him. Amar. So Rav Nachman said, Lamai Shalach li. So he said, why would Rabbi Yosef tell me such a thing? Lechnufele. Is he meaning to tell me that I should give him a better than Torah? I should be tzad. I should give him a heads up. I should give him a what do you call it? Shemalach. But bitmi, is he trying to tell me I should flatter him and treat him better? I have to be fair to everyone in the Torah. Hada Amar lemishra betigra. He said, no, what it means is I have to deal with his business first. It just means that he gets kedima, just like a kohen gets an aliyah first. You give a Talmud Chacham, his din Torah will come before someone else's. Inami, l'shuda d'daina. Another reason possibly is some dinei Torah. We say we have this in Bava Metzia, that you have sometimes the din Torah comes down to that it's the judgment of the judges. They have to decide. We had it like, for example, in the case of a Yerusha, which son did the father really want to give it? Was it likely he wanted to give it to? So he was telling him, if you have to make a judgment, you have to try to figure out on your own what was the father's intentions. For example, you should know he was a Talmud Chacham, so it's more likely that's who the father would be knighted to. Which is essentially like a character reference, like we have in Lahavdil and Gaisha courts. He's saying when it comes to Shuddha Dedaina, Rashi like struggles with this because he wants. Then it almost sounds like he's saying in the Shuddha Dedaina you should give preference to a Talmud Chacham. The Rashi explains no. In a case where the Shuddha, where your judgment will be dependent on the character of the parties, then you should take it into account. Amar Ula, Machlokes b'Bali Dinim. This machlokes which we just had a gabi whether they have to stand or sit, right? The Tanakama said they have to stand, and Yehuda said they can really sit. It's up to the Bali, the Dayanim. That's only b'Bali Din. Al be'edim divrei hakol ba'amida. By edim, everyone who holds they have to stand. D'chsev amdu shnei anashim asher lahem Erev. It says those two people have to stand. Ravuna says that also the machlokes about the Bali Dinim is only during the discussions. When it comes to the Gemara Din, then the Bali Dinim certainly have to stand up. Moshe went to judge the and the Lishbet means to give his Gemara Din, and the stood up. Lishna Achrina, another raya for this. The Edim Kigmar Din Dami. The Edim, when they say they're when they say their piece, that's the end of their involvement. So therefore, they have to stand. So the Bali Din also, when it comes to the Gemara Din, when the end of their involvement comes, that's the finale of their participation. They have to stand up. Uksibahu v'amdu shnei anoshim. Uksibahu, and it says by the Edim, v'amdu shnei anoshim, they have to stand. And since
where did Adam come in now? This Lashon Hafrina.
we're saying
We said B'shas Gemar Din, which is already the Adam are done.
no, the point is that we're comparing the Bali Din and B'shas Gemar Din to the Edim when they say their Edis. We already learned that v'amdu shnei anoshim, that the Edim have to stand when they say their Edis. And that's the end of the Edim's involvement. So we say it's comparable to the Bali Din and B'shas Gemar Din, and therefore they also have to stand up. The wife of Rav Huna had a din Torah in front of Rav Nachman. Ama hechi navid. Said, what should I do? If I stand up in front of her, I'm going to confuse the other Baldin. I'm going to intimidate him. He's going to think I'm noited to her. She's a Eishes Chaver, and I have to stand up in front of her. Amalei l'shame. So he told his assistant, go when she comes in, throw a goose at me, throw it on me, and then I'll get up, so that it will look like he's getting up for the goose, and it won't be noticeable that he's getting up in front of the Eishes Chaver, and no one will be the wiser. Correct the Gemara. So what are you going to do? The Gemara is asking, what are you going to do in a case where the if there's someone who's a Talmud Chacham, and we said that the Dayanim have to be yeshiva, how can they stand up? Keneged the psak that they have to be sitting at that time. So Gemara, the Yosef command the Shari Misane. He should the Dayan will sit like as if but he'll bend over like he's tying his shoelaces, and that will make it that he's not getting up for the chaver. He's just busy doing something else. He's not fully sitting. He's not standing, and it won't be that he's being mezalzel in the chaver by not standing up for it. And he'll at the same time he'll say the Gemar Din, so he'll be yotze that which he has to be sitting b'shas Gemar Din because he's still bent over, but he's not going to be standing up for, and he won't have not stood up for this person because he's a bit standing up tying his shoelaces. Amar Rabbi Rav Huna, Haitzum Rabbanim v'Amaretz Islu Dina B'Hadi Adad. You have a Talmud Chacham and Amaretz that are opponents in the Din Torah. Now we're talking about, right? We said that even according to the Mand Amar, who says that the Bali Din are allowed to sit, we say it's up to the Bezdin. So we say if there's a Tzubim Merabanan, so it's not bakavdik to keep him standing, so you tell him to sit, and the La'amaretz not me'amin leitiv. And you also say to the Amaretz that he should sit. That means we're talking. It could be talking about also when it's by the Gemar Din. So we said by the Gemar Din they have to be standing, but the Dayan could tell them to sit. And you also tell the Amaretz. Now the Amaretz really should understand on his own. The Koi less lamba. If the Amaretz chooses not to listen to the instruction, he figures out from his own that he's not supposed to really be sitting. They're doing it for the other person. That's not a problem. We don't say that he did the wrong thing. I'm sorry. Rabbi Shabia Havale Dina Kameder Papa. Rabbi Shabia had a din Torah for the Papa. They told him to sit because he was a Tzur Mirabban, and they also told his Baldin to sit down. Also, Shlicha the Beidina Botishbei. The Shliach Bez and the bailiff went over to the Amaretz and he gave him a kick. And the Amaretz stood up. So we say that's a problem. The loy Amalei Papa Tiv. The Papa did not tell him to sit down. This is a problem because now you're causing this Amaretz to be intimidated because he sees he's getting unequal treatment. They told the other Manama to sit, and we said the Eitzah is if you say that Tzurmer wanted to sit, you also have to tell his Baldin to sit. But over here, the Shliach Bezin made him stand. It's not going to be a problem because since the Dayan himself told him to sit, even though the Shliach Bezin got involved, he said he's just an idiot. He doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing, but it doesn't make him afraid of the Dayan. You have Amoritz and the Dayan and Tzurmer Rabbanan to have a Dintayr amongst themselves. The Tzurmer Rabbanan should not sit down first. He shouldn't come first and sit down. Because it looks like it looks like he already had his discussions with the Dayan, and the other person will get intimidated. That's only if this Tzurmer Rabbanan does not have a regular seder to learn with the Dayan. If he comes in and he sees that the Dayan is sitting with his Talmud, but he knows that they always learn at that time, he's not going to mean it doesn't mean anything. He said that's when he always learns with it. If a Tzurmer Rabbanan knows Edus of in a Dinei Mamnis, and it's a bizayin for him to go to a bezdin the Zutamine, it's a local bezdin, and they bring Rav Moshe Feinstein to come be an aid. He doesn't have to go. We have this Mishnah, which we find very often throughout Shabbos. Someone finds a sack or a box, and he's in a chashav tamid chacham. It's not his derech to pick things up in the shuk. If it was hefker, he wouldn't pick it up. He shouldn't pick it up. It's going to be bizayin. People are going to see him picking it up. They're going to say he's taking it out of the garbage. Even though there's a chiyuv of Hashavas Haveda, it's mutter b'makom bizayin. That's only if it's a dintar about mammon. I will be surah if it's a edus isura ein chachmein tuva ein etz neged Hashem. You can't. There's no bizayin or zilzal connected the Rebbeinu Shalom. If it's an isur, if the guy did it with Michal Shabbos, he has to come say this. At that point, you can give cover to a Rav. Is anyone in a rush to get going? If you have a little bit of time, this is just interesting stuff, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's not. It'll be nice to be a little caught up with everyone. Lucy, if you got to go, no problem. Okay. Zok Gemara. Rav Yemer haviyadale sadusa lamar zutra. Rav Yemer had some edus that he had of Dinei Mamnis that he knew on behalf of Mar Zutra. Also, Kameda Ameimar, he came in front of Ameimar to be the Dayan. Uzvinu lekulu. He told everyone to sit. Both the aid, Rav Yemer, and Mar Zutra and the Balei Dinim. Only Ravashi Lameimar va'amar ula machlekes Balei Dinim al ba'edin b'riyah kol ba'amida. Legabe Edom, we said everyone agrees you have to stand. Only hayase vayase esed the kavod Torah adif. Like we said, legabe hashavas aveda, that even though it's true that he's supposed to be standing, but it's a bizayin for him to be standing in front of me. So therefore, I told him to sit. Tanu Rabbah. Now we're going to go into general dinim of being showing prejudice to someone, being united towards someone in a din Torah. How do we know that a dayan should not make a saneger as a advocate, a prosecutor? If a dayan his original thought, he has his thoughts about this din Torah, what do you think's happened? How do you know he shouldn't become stubborn and defend his approach even when the the evidence seems to be showing the other way? He can't show favoritism to his own svaras. That's a problem of dvar sheker tirchak. You have to be honest with yourself. You can't, just because you had a svara, you can't try to prove it right. How do we know that a dayan can't have the way they used to? We had this in Sanhedrin. They used to have a bunch of their talmidim who would put up svaras. They would say they would add their thoughts into the entire. But if he has a dumb talmid, he can't have his fool of a talmid who's going to confuse everyone with his svaras. This talmid is going to cause him to go in the wrong way. He's going to give him a suggestion that will get him confused. How do we know if a dayan knows about another dayan on the court that he's a gazlan, therefore an unfit to be a dayan? Or an aide that knows about his fellow aide that he's a gazlan and unfit to be aide. How do you know that he can't just say the aidis? Because he says, I saw what happened. And this guy's saying what he's saying is the truth. I know it's the truth because I saw the same thing. So why should I get involved and say he's a gazlan and therefore not kosher? Because I know what he's saying is true. You got to let it play out. You have to go to the Beis Din and say that this other aide is a gazlan, or the dayan has to say this other dayan is a gazlan, and therefore not a kosher dayan or not a kosher aide, even though they're telling the truth or they're analyzing the din correctly.
But don't you need to aid him for that?
I'm sorry?
Don't you need to aid him to report that to Beis Din?
I guess maybe if there's another aid for that.
If there is. But if there isn't,
I think you're right. Yeah, then maybe probably we wouldn't listen to him if he says.
What should he do?
What do you mean? What should he do?
Should he say Aedis or not?
Yeah, he could say the Aedis. Why couldn't he say the Aedis? He's just saying he has to testify.
Then he has to testify, even though he knows the other aid is a gazlan.
It doesn't make a difference because he knows that the other aid is saying is true. So what he said, I know this guy is a gazlan. If Beis Din chooses not to accept it because they don't have a second aid for it, and therefore they accept his aidis, what harm has been done?
Well, technically speaking, you do need two kosher aidim for aidis. If he knows the other,
what was he supposed to do? What if he wasn't one of the aidim? What if he was another person? He came and said that this guy's a gazlan, and Beis Din said, "I'm sorry, you're only one aid. We can't listen to you." So that's the way it goes. So here also he said aidis. It wasn't accepted by Beis Din. What should he do? He should say he should not say his aidis. He has to say his aidis. That's what he's required to do. He's saying truthful aidis. Said truthful aidis about what happened, and he's saying truthful aidis that this guy is a gazlan. Let the Beis Din decide what to do.
But I thought he's not allowed to say that on his own that the other aid is a gazlan.
Why isn't he not allowed to say
like
that?
Lashon Hora, because it's
an aid echad is allowed to say aidis. Listen, I don't know the exact rules of determining whether someone's a gazlan or whether someone's a puzzle aidis. Maybe it could go even with a rumor. I'm not sure, but I assume you need two aidim for it. I'm sorry, we did say that. Right. How do we know if an aid knows that a dayan knows that the din that's coming in front of him it's false? He's lying. He can see what's going on. He knows this guy is a scam artist. He could smell it from a while away. The Eidim are saying the Eidis on his behind. I'm going to be masking to what the Eidis say. And the Eidim are the ones who did something wrong. I paskin kafi the facts in front of me. Now, the question is, obviously, so what's his option? What could he do? So the Mefarshim explained that it means that he should pursue it. He should, even though it's just a din Torah of Mamonis, and by din Torah you don't do Drisha v'chakiris, since he smells something is up, he should be darish and chayker the Eidim and trip them up to determine Or maybe he'll ask 1,000 questions of the Edom and it comes out true. Maybe he'll remember that he's the Dayan's the one making the mistake. But he shouldn't just accept it and accept their edus. Sagt Gemara, Minayin l'talmud sheyoshev nei rabbi, v'roy yischus la'ani v'choyv la'asher. How do you know if a talmud is sitting in front of his rebbe and he sees that the ani is right, the downtrodden what do you call litigant is correct, and the fancy guy with the $1,000 an hour lawyers is wrong. Minayin shel yishtek. How do you know that this talmud who has the idea he shouldn't be quiet? And because because he says, I don't want to get in trouble with this fancy guy, or he doesn't want to embarrass his Rebbe, who's the Dayan, that it makes it appear like he's being knighted toward the wealthy man. He has to say the truth. He's got to stand up and say what he thinks. If a Talmud sees that his Rebbe is making mistakes, I'll wait until he makes a Gemar Din. And then I'll pop up and say you made this mistake. The nenu mishali, and it will come from me. And then everyone's going to know that everyone's going to say that I knocked down my Rebbe's svara, and everyone's going to say, oh, this is the new up and coming guy who figured out the right din. The Torah says you can't do that. It's a sheker because you're allowing the Gemar Din to happen incorrectly. Now, I don't know. He seems to have also terrible midas that he's trying to upstage his Rebbe. I would think he also is doing something wrong in that regard, but that's not the subject of this discussion. The Rebbe says to the Talmud, you know about me that I would not lie for even $1 billion. Money yeshli etzel plani. I have $100 that Reuven owes to me. I only have one aid. How do you know that the aid cannot be a second aid together with the first aid? Now this sounds horrible, right? You're saying an absent. All these midvar sheker tirchaks are close cases where we're saying you're not literally lying, but you have to stay far away from sheker. This is a straight up sheker. He's testifying that someone owes money who doesn't really owe money. Going to Amalei Vadi Chatzadi Isli. He says, I got one aid. You just go stand next to that aid in the witness box, and don't say anything. Then you haven't said any sheker, but then the litigant, who he's saying owes him $100, will see that the other guy has two aidim, and he'll say, oh, you know what, I'm going to get caught. I'm going to be embarrassed in court. I'll just pay him the $100 and get out of here. So even that, I feel even your presence is a sheker. That standing there is a sheker. How do we know if someone owes who has a mana by his chaver? I'll ask him for 200, and he'll admit only to a mana because that's all he owes me. And then he'll be mechayev a shvua because he's a moedim mikvus. And then I've got other issues with this guy. I'll be also do a shvuas, a gilgal shvua. I'll be able to get him to be square on all the other disagreements we have. You're originally saying to him, going to Bezin saying he owes me 200 when he only owes you 100 is a dvar sheker.
If there was no gilgal shvua here, just the first case alone, would that not be okay?
No, I don't know if the
dvar
sheker tirchak is because you're expressing something that's not true.
Right, I'm trying to figure
or
why
it's because you're
gilgal. What's the gilgal coming in here for?
No, because otherwise, what's the harm? Why would he be doing it? What's the point of doing this?
He's doing it because he owes him $100. So
you could just say, "Give me $100." The guy's not denying that he owes the $100, but by saying you owe me 200, and instead of just him handing over the $100, he's going to deny the other 100 and then have to make a shvu on it.
Right.
So that's the reason why we're talking about a case of Gilgal Shvua, is to explain why he's asking for 200.
I
What's
thought
the
the
point?
Gilgal you're saying there's something other things that also
He
were
has some
involved.
other things that he wants to argue with him, but he has old standing machloksim about. That's the reason why he's doing this.
Got it.
Okay. How do we know if someone has $100 by his chaver? The Tanu Masayim, and he asked for 200. Shalyayma akapranu bebezdin. You shouldn't say the person, the litigant who's being asked for the $100, the 200 that he doesn't really owe. You shouldn't say, I'm going to deny it in bezdin. And I'll give him the $100 outside of bezdin, but I'll deny the 200 entirely. So I shouldn't be mechayev shvua. The other guy can't deny it altogether in order to avoid the gilgal shvua. And he says, I'll just pay him out of pocket. How do we know if there are three people? Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are owed money by Yehuda. You shouldn't say, instead of all three of us coming as parties in the Torah, Reuven, they're not brothers, I guess. Reuven will come as the Baldin, and Shimon and Levi will be the Edom. And then they'll divide it. Because they all know they're owed the money. They're the parties. You can't present yourself as an aid when you're not an aid. They did see it. The problem is that they're not kosher Edom. This sounds almost also a little more than midvar shakar tircha. It seems that it's you take money that you're not really, you can't require for him to give. Minayin l'shnayim shebo l'din. Well, how do you know if two people come to the bezdin? Echad lovish samartutin. One is dressed in rags. Echad lovish itzlas bas meyamana. The other one is dressed in a emporio suit. Sha'imrim loy levash kamaisai. They tell the wealthy man, you either have to dress in rags or you have to buy the other guy a suit. In order to avoid again, that the dayanim will be influenced by the relative appearance of the two people, so therefore we require the baldin to dress down to this. Rav Kahana masne mi loisisa, loisasia, loisisa shema shav.
You skipped.
I skipped?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kav also kamei de Rava barav huna amalu shlufi who's mukaychu b'chusu ledina. He said when they would come in front of Rabbi Rav Huna, he'd say, "Take off your fancy clothes, and then you can come to the din Torah." Where do you know that a dayan should not hear his a baldin before he hears from the other baldin? Can he listen to one first? Again, it's going to appear like undue influence. How do you know that one of the balidin, that it's not just the dayan that he can't listen to the baldin, but it's also an isser on the litigants that they can't present their case they can't call out, like the paparazzi when they call out questions to Trump. As soon as the judge he starts yelling, "This guy's a thief and he stole from me." There's also on him. The pasuk says loisisa, loisasia. The pasuk says it's not just loisisa that you shouldn't loisisa shma shav. You shouldn't say testify falsely. It's also you shouldn't cause it to be false. So that's for the litigant, not just for the dayan. The pasuk says that he didn't do good. Rav says that's someone who comes with a he doesn't advocate for himself, he sends someone else to advocate on his behalf, which is it's not a good thing, because then the other person is not going to be able to negotiate with him. If the two parties are there, they can come to an agreement. The judges can mediate. But if you have just a lawyer who's not allowed to agree to anything unless I have to go back and talk to him. Shmuel says that's talking about someone who takes a sada, he buys a sada that there are claimants on it, and he figures he's going to be able to deal with them. So this is Ashatoiv Lo Yasa B'Yamav. He figures he's going to be able to intimidate them, because he's just doing it. He's basically trying to accumulate. I don't know. I guess it's not a good thing to depend on your legal maneuvering and your ability to win against wear them down. He's going to pay $1,000 an hour lawyers to beat him in the entire. Okay, we'll stop over here. Yashakayach for your patience
Thank
last
you.
night.